Welcome to the next part of my Banjo Any Percent tutorial. In this video we're going to talk about basic movement. So, how do we move as Banjo? Well, we can just do that. It's a good start. You'll notice that if Banjo is walking there, our speed, measured by xz dash, is about 500 once he gets up to full speed. Well, we know we can do better than this by going into Talon Trot, for example. But let's just look at how to optimize this first. So, Banjo takes a little while to get up to 500, and we can actually speed that up by just starting with jump. If you jump, then you get to full speed right away. So no speeding up. You're just instantly at full speed. And that's why you'll see Banjo runners jumping around everywhere. If we don't have Talon Trot yet though, there's some other stuff we can do. We can roll. That has a maximum of 600. But then Banjo stops after that, so it doesn't seem very good. Like, yes, we get up to 600, but it'd be faster just to stay at 500, wouldn't it? Well, it turns out we can actually do better than that. So if we roll, we can just jump out of it. But that's still not quite as good because, see, we're dropping a little bit below 500 when we land there. So how can we avoid dropping below 500 when we land? Well, we can flutter before we land, so if we jump and flutter, then we stay at 500 all the way through. And no speed up time. And we can actually combine this with rolls to get to about 600 as we're rolling, and to about 500 all the other times. It's a pretty good way to move. There's even better ways to move though. In this, you can actually do something called a flutter cancel. So if we jump and then flutter quick enough, we can actually flutter into the ground. Turns out you actually have to do this. You have to jump for one frame, let go of A for another frame, and then flutter the next frame. A frame is 1/30th of a second in this game. So it's actually really tight timing. You have to mash this really fast. What I tend to do for flutter cancels is I will get the A button, I will tap it with my middle finger and then my pointer really quickly. If you're fast at mashing, then you can do it with your thumb really quickly, but I am not fast at mashing, so that's why I use this strategy. Middle finger, pointer finger. And you gotta do it not too fast, because otherwise Banjo just does a hop. But if you slow down enough, then you'll get a flutter cancel. So what you really want to do for optimal movement is you want to roll, flutter cancel, roll, flutter cancel, roll, flutter cancel, roll, flutter cancel. If you're using my method and you accidentally get a hop, then just flutter into the ground. So roll, short hop, flutter if you miss the flutter cancel. Now, as I said, you have to do this frame perfectly. And if you're playing on the US version, that's all good. But if you're playing on the PAL version, European or Australian, all those areas, then because the frame rate is actually lower, you actually can't do flutter cancels on that version. So if you're playing on PAL, you will actually have to do that. Or just that. On US, you can flutter cancel though. So that's basically rolling movement, and that's what we're going to see all through Spiral Mountain. Just a bunch of roll flutter cancels. But we eventually get Talon Trot. And once we get Talon Trot, you forget all about rolling and flutter cancelling, except for over very short distances. In Talon Trot, we want to just be jumping around. You'll see Banjo hits 700 in Talon Trot. So it's about 500 for walking, 600 for rolling, 700 for Talon Trot. One little note about the version differences. I said about PAL earlier. The frame rate's lower. It's only 25 frames a second rather than 30, but Banjo moves faster to compensate for it, so it evens all out in the end. But PAL is slower due to some cutscenes and stuff. Anyway, so once you get Talon Trot, you're jumping in Talon Trot so that you stay at 700. If you just walk in Talon Trot, it takes a while to speed up to 700. That's why we jump. Now, why do we keep jumping? Well, if we jump, you'll see Banjo drops. Not immediately, though. Lands and then drops. What's actually happening there is you get this little slide with the dust particles after your Talon Trot. At the end of that slide, you actually slow down. So you'll see once the smoke ends, Banjo slows down from 700. So you basically want to jump before that smoke ends. And you want to do short hops as quick as possible because that way you're hitting up to 700 again. So suppose you accidentally change your angle, then you lose all that speed. So if I jump forward then change left, I'm going to lose a bunch of speed. So, but if I jump again, I get back up to 700. Yeah. So if you're changing direction, you want to jump. You basically want to jump as much as possible. Small jumps and big jumps at the same speed if you can hold a very good angle on your joystick. So with big jumps, I'm going at 700 this whole way. It's just as fast as going small jumps all the way. But if you're in a complicated camera area, then you really want to be doing small jumps, because it's kind of hard to hold in a straight line in those areas. So as a rule, stick with small jumps, but big jumps aren't the worst thing. If you need to get out of Talon Trot, you can just let go of Z, but that's really slow. So what you want to do is you want to jump and then peck on the ground. At any point in that smoky slide, you can actually peck. So you can leave it quite late. You don't want to do like that to get out of Talon Trot. That's slow. And you definitely don't want to do that to get out of Talon Trot. That's also slow. So yeah, that's pretty much what you do. We've got a few other movements like beak barging. We literally use that just once in the run. And that's only to set up a trick. We don't even have to use it there. You use it a little bit more in 100%. And you got firing eggs and stuff. If you're doing a roll, you can extend a roll by doing a high jump. And that keeps the roll speed for a bit. It's also good to keep the stick neutral for a little bit after you high jump. Until it drops down. Anyway. Let's get out of this room and talk about some camera stuff. So, with the camera in this game, you've got, it starts off normal in any room, then you can press C down to zoom it out, and then you can press C down again to zoom it in. So, this isn't super important when you're first starting out, except for like reducing a bit of lag sometimes. But it's good to know, and it's good to set up. So you'll see when I do the individual levels, I'm always talking about what zoom to have the camera on. So you've got in, middle, and out. You can press C left and C right to turn around the camera. Fairly standard stuff. You can press R to get the camera behind you and hold it. Sometimes you want to hold R. So like if I hold R, the camera's trying to get behind me the whole time. Which is really good. So that gives you more precise. If you want a really precise camera angle, you can like crouch and hold R and get the camera lined up. You can't achieve that with just the C buttons. You can on Xbox, but not on N64. Anyway, so that's what the camera does. You want basically to have setups for everything. If you're trying to shoot an egg at something, suppose I wanted to, I don't know, hit this door with an egg, then I may like hold R, crouch, line it up, and shoot it. Yeah. So if you're trying to, suppose my camera was over here and I was trying to shoot this door with an egg, it might be a bit hard to tell where you're aiming. If you hold R, you can just get the door in the middle of the camera. And yeah. Anyway, so that's how all that stuff works. And then we've also got managing slopes. So this one is a lot of fun. So if I go on Talon Trot down the slope, you'll see I'm over 700. How great is that? And if I go up a slope, you'll see I'm under 700. So, on flat ground, yes, you hit 700 in Talon Trot, but slopes change that. So, what you want to do, suppose I'm going up this slope. I could just keep doing my short hop. And you see every time I hop, I'm hitting about 670 when I do the jump. So, I'll slow the game down a lot. And we'll have a look at that. So we're at 0.25 speed. Now, I'm down at 600 on the slope. If I jump off, I hit 690-ish. I think that's because it's slowed down. Normally you would hit 670. But you get the idea. If I go back down, I'm hitting very high speeds. Okay. So, what I want to do is I want to jump before a slope, and then I'm at 700 this whole time. When I land, I drop down, so I jump again. And then I'm almost up to 700. And jump again. So that's probably the best way you're going to be climbing slopes. So you want to do, if the slope is shallow enough, like not too steep, then you want to do a big jump and keep doing big jumps up slopes. And that'll work good. Now, why wouldn't you do small jumps up slopes? Well, if we slow it down and have a look. So if I did a jump before, every small jump, I'm getting back at 690. And then throughout the jump, I'm climbing up from 690. Whereas if I do big jumps, So 690, 5, 6, 7, 8. 690, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I only ever dropped down to 690 like twice. Whereas with the small jumps, I was always dropping down 690 and never climbing up to that 6, 7, 8. So if you're going up slopes, big jumps. And try and jump as soon as you land on the slope. Because you can see if I'm landing on the slope, I drop down to like 600 until I jump. So you want to have like literally 1 frame on the slope. Jump as soon as possible. Of course, that does get a bit difficult when you're going at full speed and you're trying not to jump too early. But yeah, so big jumps up slopes and running down slopes if you can. So like, yes, I want to be jumping. If I run down this slope, let's have a look in slow motion. So you've got that thing that slows you down at the end of a slide. But if I'm jumping onto a slope, then running down it, I slow down here, but I speed back up almost instantly. So actually, if the slope is big enough, it's actually better to run down the slope and just take that slowdown that you get at the end of a slide. So yeah, that's what I like to do, run down slopes. But if the slope is a bit shorter, what you can do is you can like just make your slides as long as possible on the slope. So really long slides with really short jumps. If the slope is a little bit shorter. This slope is right on the edge. It's almost worth jumping down. It's almost worth running down. It's hard to say. But yeah. And of course, all this manages with how your jumping actually lines up with where you want to go in the level. So, another thing you can do is if you jump off a slope, you conserve that speed. So I'm dropping like down. So like I'm still over 700 throughout that jump. Whereas if I just walk off the slope, it slows down a lot quicker. So if you're coming off a slope, if you're not changing your angle too much, you want to do like a really big jump off it. So you keep that slope speed for longer. Slopes are complicated, but you'll get used to them. If you're interested in tool-assisted speedrunning at all, I would recommend like just Taz the first room of Grunty's Lair Talon Trotting up that slope, and you'll understand them heaps well. So yeah, here's another slope. I would do big jumps up it. But of course, if the slope gets too steep, which this almost is, eventually if you try and do big jumps up of it, you're actually going to start hitting the slope. So I think this one is just like non-steep enough that you can get around it. But I'll go to a steep slope later and then we'll have a look. But yeah, you can see this one's steeper, so I'm actually getting to 776 there. Now, one little thing with this Talon Trot sliding is you can do something that's often called a Taz jump. So, if you slide off a ledge, and so if you jump, you have this slide thing. But with that slide thing, you actually have a frame where you can jump out of it. Sounds kind of complicated, but I'll explain exactly what's going on here. So, as I said before, when you jump, you get this smoky slide at the end. At the end of that slide, you lose your speed. But if you are able to jump on the last frame of that slide, you get a jump in midair. So that's really cool. Like that. So that's like a frame perfect trick though. So it's quite hard to do. You can get used to the timing for it, but luckily or unluckily, depending how you look at it, it's not used in the run in any serious form. There is one that you can do, but it saves like less than half a second. So yeah, it's a cool trick to do, but yeah, and you can use it to make like really big distances. The Taz uses it all over the place. Anyway, so that's like a Taz jump, but it's not super important. Let's see. So we've got swimming physics as well. So if I was swimming here, swimming all around, and you just hold B to go fast. If you need to turn around, you can hold A, press A to do a little paddle, or you can just hold B. You hold B most of the time. But turning is really bad in swimming. Like really, really, really bad. So what you want to do is actually hold R the entire time you're swimming. You can see Banjo turns sharper there. As soon as I held R, Banjo turned sharper. So, like, I'll try and do a turn like this. You can see he's taking a really wide turning circle. As soon as I press R, he's sharpened up. So that's really good. You want to use your R to maneuver your swimming. So basically, whenever you're swimming, you're holding B and R for basically the whole time. You're never letting go of those two things. Unless you need to do really tight turns, in which case you might swap from B to A. Again, a lot of these are dependent on setups, so yeah, it's tricky. Now, let's talk about slope timers. So we have this thing ST, which is a little bit under XZ dash. That's a slope timer. Counts up to 1. When it hits 1, you slip off the slope. So, yeah. That's what a slope timer does. Now, that counts up when Banjo's shadow is over a slope. So if I jump over this slope, it's still up at 1. But if I jump away from this slope, water counts as flat ground here in this situation. So if I jump over the water, which counts as flat ground, it changes back to 0. So that's really good. Basically, when it's 1, Banjo slips off. So you can do anything you want on the slope until it reaches the 1. And yeah. So you can actually climb slopes. So if I want, I could go down here. Yeah. Lots of stuff you can do with slopes. So I think that's about all I can really show you in Rusty Bucket Bay. Let's go to Treasure Trove Cove and have a look at some more of the physics there. So I'll show you similar things with the slope timers here, while we're on the topic of slope timers. And these become really important later on in some individual levels. So this is a slippery slope. We can climb up it in Talon Trot, and we're fine. But as soon as we're out of Talon Trot, we slip off. Has a slope timer. So we can't run up because the slope timer hits 1. But if I jump out over flat ground, I can stay on this slope indefinitely. But if I stay on there too long, and if I don't jump over flat ground, I slip down. So that's how slope timers work. You can use it to do some really crazy skips. And so obviously you might be thinking, well, why don't we just stay in Talon Trot? Well, there are some slopes that you can't even climb in Talon Trot, but you can use this slope timer trick on. So suppose I wanted to kind of get up here. Talon Trot will slide off that slope, for example. But if I climb up there and do the slope timer thing, I can actually stay up on that slope indefinitely. If I didn't mess up just then. So you can't even climb this slope with Talon Trot, but you can climb it without Talon Trot. We don't need to climb this slope in the run, at least not in this category, but you know, you can do all sorts of skips. You can just like climb the level geometry if you have a good knowledge of the slope timer. So if you have a really good knowledge of the slope timer, you can actually get all the way up to this lighthouse without knowing how to fly. So even, like, I can't even Talon Trot on this bit here, but even, like, just using the slope timer and jumping out over flat ground, you can get up here. And there we are. So you can do crazy, crazy things with the slope timer. It's really good. Anyway, so that's basically Banjo movement on the ground. We talked a little bit about swimming. There's also the issue of flying. So we'll be flying quite a lot in this game. And basically what I want to tell you about flying is very similar to what we have about swimming. So with flying, I'll just get to a fly pad here. Don't have that learned, but luckily we're on the practice menu. So good. Alright, now we've learned flying. So take off from the fly pad, and you want to hold R the entire time that you're flying, because you'll turn sharp. If I don't hold R, I'm turning way less sharp. You can see the difference there. B is to beak bomb. Because we're using FFM in this run, which I'll talk about later, you never won't have beak bomb. So that's good. Beak bomb depends on where your camera is. So if I point my camera down, I'm going to beak bomb down. And yeah, flying, you've also got, so you press A to gain height, and it sort of depends on exactly how you press A. So I'll be talking about various setups in this run, but the speed at which you press A actually matters. So if I do like 5 really quick taps, I don't get heaps of height there. But if I was down that low again, and I did like 5 really slow taps, I get a lot more height. Of course, you want to try and manage how quickly you're tapping, and generally a good way to get heaps of height really quickly is just to do a few really quick taps and then actually beak bomb up, rather than using the feathers. And that saves yourself a lot of feathers. You want to touch as many jiggies as you can in flying, because you don't get the dance there. So I got that jiggy pretty nicely because I was in flying. No dance, no slowing down. Same as swimming. If you're swimming, you don't get a dance. If you're a transformation, you don't get a dance. But you will get a dance if you are just Banjo on foot. So, suppose I go down here and I grab this jiggy. Banjo's doing this jig. This is 4.5 seconds, and the last one in the level is about 8.5 seconds. So you want to avoid as many of those as possible. You won't have to think about that too much. It'll just come down to the routing. So I also want to talk about full damage. So with full damage, Banjo jumps down to there. He's pretty okay. No worries there. But if Banjo jumps down to here, there's some full damage. So it actually, if I turn off my infinites, let's turn on L to levitate. So how is full damage actually calculated? Well, it actually depends on where you did your jump from. So right now, it's storing my original position on the ground. So even if Banjo goes up really high here, then if I let him fall down, he's not going to take any full damage. So actually, but if I jump from here, up here, as we saw before, I would take full damage. Or if I jump from up here, for example. Now, Banjo will enter this falling animation after he's fallen for long enough. And if that happens, you're basically going to take full damage. But it depends. So if I go back up here, he'll look like he takes full damage, but he actually didn't take any there. That's because he entered the falling animation, but I got some more height, so he was okay. Anyway, there's another thing that you can do. If you've gotten into this falling animation, then if you hit an enemy, you can actually kind of save it with a flutter. So that's one way to cancel full damage. Another way to cancel full damage is to use ground pound. So now if I ground pounded straight down here, I would take damage. But if I'm in the recoil of a ground pound, then I don't. So that's good. And you can actually do that from any height you want. So you ground pound, you recoil, and then that lets you get down without taking the full damage. So it's not a very good example of where to do this in Treasure Trove Cove, but I'll see what I can do. So if I ground pound here, it's going to be quite difficult. Anyway, if I'm in the ground pound recoil and I fall down really far, no full damage. So that's good. Good to know. Also, you can use gold feathers to avoid full damage. So if I were to gold feather off an edge like here, if I did hit ground, there would have been no full damage. Yeah. So that's all about full damage. Use ground pound and recoil for most of it. Again, you won't have to think about that too much. It just comes down to how you route them. Now, there's a whole host of things I could talk about with movement as transformations and stuff, but I'm not going to really talk about that until later. Now, let's see. So we've covered pretty much a lot of the movement that I want to cover. We know how to move up slopes. I'll just show you what happens on a steep slope. So I'm moving on a steep slope and I try and do my long jumps up here. You'll see Banjo's actually losing height during the jump. That's because he's running into the slope as he's still doing his jump. So if a slope gets past a certain point of steepness, you actually just want to short hop up the whole thing. So with something like this, you would short hop. See how I'm staying over 450 the whole time, but if I do a long jump, I'll drop under. Yeah, stuff like that. It's very important. And yeah, so we got, as I said before, if you're flying or swimming, you skip jiggy jigs. Also, if you take damage on the exact same frame that you grab a jiggy, you skip a jiggy jig. But that's really hard. We don't do that in this run. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much everything I want to talk about with general movement in this game. I'm sure many more things will actually come up, but it's kind of hard to predict that now. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about in this section. Next section, we're talking about FFM setup, how to do all the stuff with that. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next section.